In the misty highlands of western Honduras, where emerald jungle vines grip ancient stone, the shattered pyramids of Copán still rise like questions from the forest floor. Once the nerve center of a glittering Maya kingdom, the city erupted with life. Chanting priests, bustling markets, astronomer-priests charting Venus, until suddenly it didn't. How could a metropolis so sophisticated collapse so completely? Enjoying the mystery so far? Subscribe for more explorations like this.
In the story ahead, we'll trace Copán's 400-year boom and bust arc, plunge into newly decoded ancient DNA, and weigh drought, dynastic intrigue, and social tension in a bid to solve one of archaeology's most haunting riddles.
Cradled in a broad, fertile valley just a stone's throw from the Guatemalan border, Copán sat at the hinge of two worlds, the Maya lowlands to the north and the rising volcanic highlands to the south. Trade routes threaded through its plazas like capillaries. Caravans hauling obsidian, cacao, and jade converged here before fanning out toward Teotihuacan in central Mexico or the Isthmian corridors of Panama. Ringed by forested limestone hills, the valley's deep alluvial soils and reliable Copán River made it an agricultural sweet spot, an oasis of maize amid otherwise rugged terrain. Position, resources, and connectivity, these were the geographic cards Copán played to become a cosmopolitan hub. Picture a warrior merchant striding up the Copán River, jade goggles glinting, macaw feathers fluttering in the humid breeze. Hieroglyphs call him Kinich Yax Kuk Mo, sun-eyed first Quetzal macaw. Where he came from is still debated. Some glyph hints point to the great metropolis of Teotihuacan, others to Tikal, but the outcome is clear. In 426 AD, he seized Copán's modest hilltop and proclaimed a new dynasty. To legitimize his coup, he married into local nobility, imported Teotihuacan martial iconography, and commissioned the first great temple platform. By the time he died, barely a decade later, the blueprint for a 4th-century royal lineage was etched in limestone. Successors amplified his template with theatrical flair. They laid out a ceremonial core of stepped pyramids and hieroglyph-covered stelae so dense in history that modern epigraphers nickname Copán the Athens of the Maya. Architects vaulted corbel arches over processional corridors. Sculptors chiseled portraits so lifelike that bone structure and jewelry pop even after a millennium of rain. Astronomer-priests tracked Venus through observation tunnels, aligning temples to solstices with uncanny precision. Trade emissaries returned with obsidian blades from far-off Pachuca, cacao beans from the Pacific slopes, and scarlet macaws bred in distant jungles. Material wealth, cosmic knowledge, and political theater fused, transforming Copán from frontier outpost into one of Mesoamerica's most sophisticated city-states. Archaeologists opened narrow trenches beside Copán's acropolis, lifting limestone capstones that sealed elite tombs and sacrificial pits alike. From thousands of scattered remains, they chose 7 individuals whose bones still held intact tooth roots or dense petrous bone, nature's best safes for ancient DNA. 2 were high-status males interred with jade and shell. 5 others represented commoners and possible sacrifices, giving the study a social cross-section. Deep inside Trinity College Dublin's clean labs, the team drilled rice grain slivers of bone, dissolved them in reagents, and coaxed out DNA fragments shorter than a tweet. After building sequencing libraries, they ran the samples on high-throughput machines, reading each genome tens of millions of times to filter ancient molecules from modern contaminants. Y chromosome markers traced paternal lines, mitochondrial DNA mapped maternal heritage, and whole genome coverage allowed fine-scale ancestry modeling. Copán's glyphs name rulers and wars, but they rarely mention ordinary people or migrants who married into the dynasty. Genomics fills that silence. By comparing these 7 Copán genomes to thousands of ancient and modern ones across the Americas, researchers could clock population booms, spot highland Mexican ancestry pulses, and even time the city's demographic crash. In short, DNA turns bones into witnesses, testifying where inscriptions fall silent. Run the genetic clock backward, and Copán's people remain unmistakably Maya for nearly 7 millennia. Their genomes dovetail with late archaic villagers who tilled the Yucatan between 5,600 and 3,700 BC, thread through classic dynasties at Chichen Itza and Campeche, and land squarely in the DNA of the 7 million Maya alive today. In other words, Copán was no foreign colony, but a long-lived branch of a vast, resilient family tree. Yet, buried in that continuity lies a sliver of novelty. About 6% of each genome looks most at home in Mexico's highland valleys, ancestry closely related to Zapotec speakers from Oaxaca. Statistical models pin its arrival to AD 250 to 550, the very decades when jade, obsidian, and political emissaries flowed along Mesoamerica's trade highways. Whether merchants, marriage partners, or warrior diplomats, these outsiders wove themselves into Copán's social fabric and left a durable genetic trace. 2 male burials tell the human side of those statistics. CPM-13 rested in a vaulted tomb, neck draped with jade beads, feet against fine polychrome ceramics, classic signals of royal blood. CPM-12, just meters away, lay face down in a flexed pose typical of sacrificial offerings. Both men carried the same paternal Q1BY chromosome lineage, a marker that traces back to the first Americans crossing Beringia. Yet genome-wide, they were not close kin, underscoring how lineage symbols could bridge, but not erase, Copán's sharp social divides. By stitching together long-shared DNA segments, identical by descent blocks, researchers modeled Copán's effective population at approximately 19,000 around AD 730. A demographic crest that likely translated to 25 to 30,000 mouths in real terms. Maize agriculture, terraced hillsides, and river-fed fields powered the surge, but they also tightened the city's margin for error. When drought, debt, or descent finally struck, a society calibrated for growth had little cushion for collapse. Tree ring and lakebed records show an ominous dip in precipitation beginning in the mid-700s AD, a cycle of mega-droughts that tightened its fist through the early 9th century. Terraces dried, maize stalks withered, and the Copán River shrank to a trickle. For farmers already pushing every arable patch, the margin between surplus and starvation vanished. At the same time, distant superpowers flexed. Tikal in the Guatemalan lowlands and Calakmul in the north jostled for supremacy. Teotihuacan's long shadow still loomed from central Mexico. Copán's kings, once savvy diplomats, now burned energy propping up fragile alliances and quelling border skirmishes. In 822 AD, the final ruler commissioned a stela that never got its finishing glyphs, a monument to ambitions interrupted. Archaeology paints a stark wealth gradient, palatial compounds stacked with spondylus shell, jade, and cacao on one hill, humble thatch and clay on the next. DNA and isotopes hint that many elites were foreign-born, enjoying imported luxuries while locals labored. In drought years, that disparity likely festered into unrest, tax burdens unpayable, faith in divine kingship cracked. Genomic curves trace the aftermath. Copán's effective population plummets right after AD 750, mirroring the halt in new temples and the mass exodus recorded in settlement surveys. Hunger, conflict, or migration, probably all three, thinned the gene pool so abruptly that by the 10th century, only jungle vines claimed the plazas. The collapse was not a single blow, but a slow-motion unraveling, where climate, politics, and inequality tugged every thread until the tapestry came apart. That royal Y chromosome, Q1b, is more than a dynastic badge. It's a breadcrumb from the first footsteps across the Bering Land Bridge some 15,000 years ago. Finding it in Copán stitches the classic Maya into a single continental saga, linking Arctic tundra camps, plains bison hunters, and rainforest astronomers through one unbroken paternal thread. The 6% Oaxacan signal reminds us that ideas, crops, and people moved together. Maize itself was a migrant, domesticated in Mexico's Balsas River basin before sweeping south. As kernels traveled, so did traders, spouses, and diplomats, splicing cultural DNA exactly as their genomes mingled. Copán's art and architecture, shot through with both local and highland motifs, stands as masonry proof of that hybrid vigor. Ancient genomes are only chapter 1. Coming soon, drought scars etched in DNA methylation, pathogen fingerprints hiding in dental calculus, even family tree maps of village-to-capital migrations, all promising to turn Copán's silent stones into a talking archive of climate shocks, epidemics, and everyday lives. 7 genomes, however vivid, are still a pinhole view into a metropolis that once housed tens of thousands. All samples come from the city's ceremonial core, leaving village hamlets, craft barrios, and hill slope farms genetically mute. Radiocarbon precision tapers after the 8th century, blurring the exact tempo of decline. Future work will need dozens of burials across social classes and time slices, paired with proteomics to spot drought-driven malnutrition, pathogen DNA to track epidemics, and low-temperature plasma dating to tighten chronologies. Only then can we grade each suspect, climate, war, inequality, by its true culpability in Copán's fall. Copán's towering pyramids once proclaimed eternal power. Now they whisper a caution as vines crawl over fractured stone. Ancient DNA has sharpened our view, showing that the city's people were both deeply rooted Maya and, at the margins, open to newcomers, a balance of continuity and change that fueled centuries of brilliance. Yet the same interconnectedness that enriched Copán also amplified risk. Drought struck harder, politics grew tangled, inequalities widened, and the great machine shuddered to a halt. The lesson is less about a single silver bullet cause than about complex systems stretched past their tipping points. Resilience depends on slack in the system, diverse food webs, flexible governance, social equity, just as much in the 21st century as in the 9th. Copán's ruins stand as a testament to human ingenuity and a reminder of its limits. Listen closely, and the stones still speak. Build boldly, but build with room to bend.